Hi, I'm State Senator Joe Markley. I'm sitting here in the Connecticut State Senate chamber. We're back up here a good deal this time of year, and that's one of the things I'll be talking about today. The Senate chamber, not so often. It's a beautiful place and a place I'm always honored to sit. We've actually only been in session twice so far this year. Opening day, which is largely ceremonial, and then we were back last week for the purpose of voting on judges only. Right at the moment, the business is all in the committees, and bills are moving through the process, and it won't be till we get a little further towards spring that we start meeting here in the chamber on a regular basis. But we will get around to some topics today, and with me to help make the conversation conversational is Jody Latina, who works for us here at Senate Republicans, but might be familiar with some of you from her past
life.
Your former life as a television journalist.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and a lot has been going on over the past week. You've had 3 of 4 major public hearings that are happening because of this task force that you're sitting on. It's a special task force in light of what happened down in Newtown, and thus far the conversations have been fascinating to say the least. We've talked a lot about school security and enhancement. Yesterday you presided over a mental health issues public hearing. There was also gun violence prevention, and this evening there'll be the last of the 4, which is down in Newtown, for folks in the local community to actually come out and speak. But tell me a little bit just about the mental health screening which you sat in on. The debate and the testimony went on for quite some time. I think you were there till the wee hours of the night. But a lot is being talked about. Yeah,
we were there. It started at 10 in the morning and didn't end until close to 11 in the evening. And I was there for most of it. It's funny about being up at the Capitol that it's not like they can schedule things so that you don't have conflicts, and especially in the Senate, because you have more committees to cover. I was off with the Labor Committee, which I'm also on for a good stretch. But what I heard, especially when we got into the evening, was fascinating. You know, we have a wonderful thing in Connecticut that we have public hearings on legislation, and basically any citizen has the right to come up here and speak to the legislature, and they do. In some of these hearings, hundreds of people will show up, as they did yesterday, and everyone gets their 3 minutes, and then they can be questioned. And the last, I was there, I think, for about the last 6 hours straight of the hearing, and it was a combination of mental health professionals, school guidance counselors, a child psychiatrist of over 40 years, very interesting man, and people who have received services from the mental health system, people who are in recovery from mental illnesses and challenges. And the combination of perspectives, the variety of perspectives, was very illuminating. And I think that, among other things, one of the things that I think, and the members of this commission who basically were selected on the basis of the committees they serve on. I'm there because I'm the ranking member on the Human Services Committee. I think the members of the commission were very attentive, very engaged, and I think it started to clarify a lot of things for us. For instance, one of the things that has been very much discussed is, should there be such a thing as outpatient commitment of the mentally ill, where you say you're not in a facility, but we're going to have the legal power of commitment over you. A lot of states have done that, and in the wake of what happened in Newtown, there's been a push in that direction. I was sympathetic to it too when I first heard about it, but after the last week or 10 days of looking into it, and especially the testimony last night, I'm convinced that it's not the right way for the state to go at this point. Another thing that's been before us has been involuntary administration of medications. I have a instinctive resistance to that, Jody, and we heard from a lot of people who had been in the situation of being prescribed psychotropic medications which just didn't work for them, and they had to fight to get off of them, and they only were able to recover when they had gotten off of them. Certainly they work in some cases, they don't work in other cases, but it's not a cure-all that ought to be imposed automatically, and we shouldn't take away people's right to make decisions about their own medication.
I thought it was interesting too, there were quite a few parents in the audience who discussed on a case-by-case basis things that they were running into. There was one mom who told a really emotional story about her child actually surviving the Newtown shooting. She's a single mom. She has 3 boys at home. One of them survived. One of them is diagnosed with mental illness. And one of them, for all intents and purposes, is just a normal run-of-the-mill kid. But she is struggling herself with survivor's guilt, taking care of 3 people on her own, and the child that does have some issues, dealing with different medications that may or may not work, getting help from the town with different services. So it really was heart-wrenching, and I don't know if you could sense that in the room when you were there.
Absolutely. A great deal of the testimony, and there were a lot of parents that spoke about the problems they had getting help for their children. And you know, this goes back to, say, my biggest frustration. I suppose in a way it's the biggest opportunity to be useful, which is to push for better coordination between these programs. It's a natural thing. You've got many different departments that for various reasons have an involvement in mental illness, and they are naturally defensive of their own approaches and the efficacy of the treatment that they provide, the skills of the people involved. But I feel like one of the things we can do as legislators, standing apart from this somewhat, is to try to encourage or persuade or force these different groups to work together more effectively, and to come up with a system for all the social services we provide that moves more towards a single entry point, where rather than saying to somebody, well, here's 13 different agencies that might be able to help you, to say, go to this one place, and what's available is all available there and can be coordinated there, instead of leaving it to the individual to try to navigate through a very complicated system. A system that's complicated even when you're sitting in a legislative office trying to understand it, let alone when you're looking for help.
It's interesting you say that, because I did speak to a separate parent who said that she was hopeful that there would be more outreach. She didn't realize how many programs were out there, and that some of them may have applied to her son's situation. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia late in life because of a psychotic event. And interestingly enough, the commissioner was saying that was a population of folks that she didn't feel they were reaching out to as well as they could be. So it almost seems as though this conversation yesterday was great on so many levels, because parents were looking for something. I think some of the commissioners were looking and seeing what other folks were doing, and inherently telling you all where they know their own deficiencies are. And the conversations hopefully will get to that point where you're talking about, where everything gets synthesized, because it is difficult. And when you're dealing with somebody who has a mental health issue, your focus is on them and getting them better. And how do you jump through all the hoops in order to get the help? Some of these parents were just physically and emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, you know, I've had it as a member of the Human Services Committee too. If you serve on the Banks Committee, you're less likely to hear stories that really tug at your heart, let's say. But on Human Services and on something like this, and I think it's important. There's one of the reasons that I've chosen to focus on that area of government, is that I think we need to both be sensitive to the people's needs, and yet we have to find cost-effective ways to do it. We can't simply say, here's a need, and just shovel money towards it. And in a lot of cases, I think money is not the solution. Better coordination and more efficient delivery of services are what we need. Of course, the strange thing about this entire commission, Jody, is here we are presented effectively with saying, what can we do with the mental health system in Connecticut? We've got just a couple of weeks to put together recommendations. My hope is, I was saying to the chairs last night after this was over, I would rather see us take just one step, if it's the right step, than to try to do something that's overly ambitious, because there's no way that we can solve it in a couple of weeks, or come up with something that's going to put everything to rights. But if we could just move in the right direction, then take a deep breath, and then take another step, I think that would be good. Another thing that concerns me about the process that we're involved in, which is still not completely fleshed out, is that the hearing we had last night was not a hearing on a specific proposal. It was a hearing to gather information. At some point, there's going to be a specific proposal, a bill before us, and I strongly I've strongly urged everyone I can to say we need to have the hearings again when we have the bill before us, that it would be a mistake for us to come up with something and not go back to the experts and to the general public to say, what do you think? And I always am suspicious when there's a resistance to doing it. And I can't say that there's a resistance at the moment, but there hasn't been a commitment to it either. But I feel that it's usually an indication that you know you're going to get complaints. And that you shouldn't be scared of complaints. You should go ahead and if you have confidence in what you're putting forward, you should assume that it can bear scrutiny, and you should invite the scrutiny.
And I think it's important too that, excuse me, a lot of folks yesterday were bringing up the point that not all the facts are known, and many of the law enforcement investigations may not be known until the summer. And so basing these new laws without knowing all the facts could be troublesome.
It doesn't, yes, there's a way in which that is maybe essentially is a nonsensical part of the whole operation, which is we're doing something in response to an event which we don't know any more about than the general public. It's not like as legislators we've received some kind of special briefing on this. All I know is what I read in the paper like everybody else. And especially again in the mental health aspect of it. If we're talking about a specific young man, obviously severely troubled, tormented, almost possessed would not be too strong a word. But what was going on? Was he medicated? Was he under treatment? All those questions will not be resolved. We'll have made our recommendations and disbanded before we have those answers, if we ever have those answers.
I want to bring up a different subject, but sort of on the same level as mental health. You've been working diligently over the last several weeks with some of your constituents on something called bath salts, which are found in these packages. We were able to find some of these, and a lot of these are being sold over the counter, gas stations, quickie marts. And this is a new phenomenon to myself, and I'm sure maybe some of the people out there watching this. Tell me the story behind this and your concern over it.
Well, like a lot of things, like the story behind my concern is that somebody contacted me about it, and like so many things, once you are aware of something, then you notice it all over the place. You hear more about it. These bath salts, they're being sold as bath salts, not for human consumption, but they're sold at very high prices. Some of these packages, as much as maybe $40 for a package.
Really, for one package?
For one package. So you know that nobody is taking these and dumping them in their
bath.
In their bath, exactly. And what they're doing is they're ingesting them any way they can ingest them. They're snorting them, or they're eating them, or they're doing whatever to get them into their system. And they're purely chemical, and they're completely unpredictable in their effect, in part because they're not the same from package to package.
The chemistry is different.
The chemistry is different, and the effect that it has on people is very different. But the effect in some cases is extremely intense in terms of hallucinations and psychotic episodes and paranoia and violence, and also addiction. I was contacted by a woman I've known since we were kids together in Southington, whose son became involved with this. And really, just over a matter of months, has, turned their family upside down and left her really in a life and death struggle to keep her son off of these bath salts. And she's undertaken a crusade in the Southington area to get them out of the stores. And interestingly, the store owners in a lot of cases they're decent people. They're cooperative when they're told about what's going on. All they know is here's a product and people are buying it.
Right,
and,
right.
But when they realize the severity of what it's doing, one of the problems with trying to regulate them is that because it's a chemical compound, it's hard to outlaw a chemical compound because you just change the chemistry a little bit and then it's legal again. So what I proposed as a piece of legislation is something that has been passed in some other states, which would make illegal any such substance which has a hallucinogenic effect, whatever the particular compound is. So I'll try to move that forward, But part of it is going to be a matter of awareness. That I think that there's probably, I was at a meeting with parents just last week where this was discussed, and this particular aspect was new to almost everybody in the room. So it's not something that people know about, but unfortunately the first people that find out about these things are the kids that are the most susceptible to getting involved with them.
Well, and I was going to say, it was disturbing to me just reading through a police report, because they're investigating them in Southington to find out where these are being sold and to try to identify the store owners and tell them that these are not proper. They write in their report that the bath salts actually have some pretty bad side effects. They compare them to a side effect of cocaine, including increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, agitation, the hallucinations, the paranoia, and the delusions you were discussing earlier. Harming themselves and others is not out of the scope of what could happen if these are ingested. And I think, even as a parent myself, that's really scary, especially if these are over the counter. Do you think that there's going to be a sense in whatever committee this gets brought up in that the more lawmakers know about them, hopefully the easier it is that they will say, yes, by all means, let's put this on the list?
I can't imagine what the pro-bath salt argument would be, especially since they really have no legitimate use at all. And it's essentially a toxic chemical. And the only way they're getting around anything is by putting the label on it that says not for human consumption. But it's not for anything else. And I think we have to, you know, Jody, I'm the last person to want to pass laws and make restrictions. If there's another way to do it, that's what I'm for. But when you've got something like this, which appears to be harmless, which is a danger that people aren't aware of at all, and that serves no useful purpose, I feel like it's incumbent on us to take action against it.
It's interesting, on the back of one of the packages it actually says the manufacturer, distributors, and retailers are not responsible or liable for any misuse of the product committed by the consumer.
Yeah.
And so clearly I think that they even know that they might be subject to some sort of scrutiny. And in the report, it was clear to the police officer, at least, that some of the store owners were actually ringing these up under lottery tickets, as if to sort of hide what they were selling. So clearly there's some level of understanding there, and I think you're on the right track. Okay,
well, we'll see. You know, in a certain way, it was an extension of the involvement I got into with the adolescent prescription drug abuse that made me in a position where people were interested in making me aware of these things. But I have to say, there's a youth culture in this world which is now very separate from the adult world. And not having children myself, I'm even more away from it than I would be otherwise. So it's been an educational thing for me, but it's an education where I hope I learn something I could use to practical, worthwhile effect.
Absolutely. Now, you've also been doing a series of town halls. You represent 16th District, so that includes Waterbury and Prospect and Cheshire and Southington and Wolcott. Yeah. Can't forget Wolcott. How are those going? Are people turning out, and what's on their minds?
We have done 3 so far. We did Waterbury, Cheshire, and Prospect. In fact, tonight I'll be in Southington. And we've had a very good turnout. And there's been a good deal of discussion of the tragedy in Sandy Hook, and interestingly, I would say overwhelmingly a sense that that the mental health aspect is the only side that really can address this in the long run. That additional restrictions on legal gun ownership wouldn't have done anything to prevent this from happening. And that the best we can do on that side is better enforcement, perhaps better background checks on the people getting the weapons. Of course, the other thing that we talk about a lot is economy, budget, taxes, debt, all those issues.
Yes, because as there's so much on the plate, there's this looming deficit, which right now is about $2 billion over the next 2 years. That's going to encompass a lot of conversation in this circle.
It's funny that I feel like we have almost 2 sessions going on at once, because the Sandy Hook task force has a life of its own and is by itself a consuming thing, and yet there's the whole normal legislative process. The budget part of it will get underway early next month when the governor comes forward with his budget. We have a briefing on the Appropriations Committee next week with the Secretary of OPM, Ben Barnes, and I'm sure we'll get a preview of what's coming. As you said, it's over $2 billion. My expectation is they're going to come back with a budget that cuts not based on last year's budget, but based on what the normal increase would be, cuts several $100 million, and that the remainder of the deficit the governor will propose making up with revenue enhancements, as they call them. I mean, part of that is letting some taxes that were due to expire not expire, and maybe some other taxes, fees, et cetera, and cuts in aid to municipalities. I wouldn't support either of those things. I feel that we can't raise taxes. The last tax increase had a devastating effect on our economy. We never recovered from the income tax in 1991. A tax increase is the worst thing we could do, and cutting municipal aid is a tax increase by other by other terms, because the towns are going to just have to increase taxes, so we're not solving anything. The only answer is to look at spending within state government. On appropriations, I'm happy to be serving on the subcommittee which oversees higher education. I think there's a lot of savings to be found in the higher education system. I've put out some proposals. I've put out a rather radical proposal to eliminate the central office of the state university system, which is a purely administrative office overseeing originally the 4 teachers' colleges, as they used to be known, Eastern, Western, Southern, and Central. Now in the merger 2 years ago, they were given authority over the community colleges. I've simply suggested letting the 4 colleges govern themselves again and putting the community college back under its own structure as it was before. The central office has not only is a huge expense with many, many high-paid bureaucrats, no other word for it, but it's been an embarrassment. We had a scandal there with the chancellor who was brought in, deals were made and raises were given and so forth without any real oversight. And since I've been here 2 years, we've had 3 different chancellors in that office. It's dysfunctional, it's expensive, it's unnecessary, and I will do my best to get rid of it. And that's where we need to find the money, not taking it away from the towns, not taking it away from the hospitals as was
happened
done
in December,
not taking away from the nonprofits as happened in November, but cutting the cost of running state government.
Do you think that folks are receptive when you're at these town halls to some of these issues that you're bringing up? What are they hearing out there? Because you're meeting directly with constituents. I think when we're up here in Hartford, we're sort of living in a bubble, and so we talk about these things, but are the folks on the outside, are you folks talking about these things?
Oh, people, I always feel at these town halls almost like I'm cheating, because the response to what I say is so good, and I would say it whatever the response was, it's where I'm coming from. But I really do think that it's right now people understand the need for it. You know, I served a term back in the 1980s. We had big surpluses, the economy was booming, and I was running around saying we have to cut spending, and no one particularly, it was not on the top of anyone's mind in those days. I think I'm probably better suited for this climate because my instinct is to say, what can we do to make things more efficient? And my desire as a legislator is to put pressure on the executive side of government to make it more efficient, to make it work better. And I think that's what's needed right now, and I think people realize it.
Well, let's talk about something fun. You've been very busy in the community over the last few weeks. You visited with some folks from the Naugatuck Community College. You were at several ribbon cuttings for some new businesses in town. Talk a little bit about that part of the job, because it is fun.
It's a fascinating thing, Jody. I mean, really, and people act like they should be sympathetic to me, but I enjoy doing this, and I enjoy it in part because of the variety. I think that was the one thing I'm not well suited for, is to do the same thing all day, every day. Exactly. And this is the opposite of that. I had a day recently where, well, I mean, one of the things that I was looking forward to for weeks was the dog pound ball in Wolcott, just because it's so unlikely sounding. And of course, it's such a delightful event at the Grange Fair with a youth talent show with the dogs dressed up in costumes. And to say I could go from that to I don't know. I was at the tribute dinner for Dick Bizzuto, for instance. You mentioned it was a ribbon cutting at Richard Chevrolet recently. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go down for the social service agency in Waterbury for their, or in Southington, I mean, for the beginning of their
They're getting a renovation
process. On Friday morning, I'm going to go to a chamber breakfast where a manufacturer in Cheshire is going to be honored. So there's all those different kinds of things, plus meetings. I've met with the. I was out to Meriden where they do the training for the municipal police.
Oh, wow.
Because talking to police chiefs, I became interested in that area, and I go out there and we get shown the operation. I had no idea what that operation was like. Had a fascinating time and understand much better what they do and how they help the community and what the state can do to make that work better. So there's a lot of things like that, and I'll tell you, I can do state senator with 5 communities and 100,000 people. It just is a matter of how much time I have to spend at it. You could stay busy all the time, going to things and meeting with people to try to understand what's going on. And if anything, I've had too much of an inclination to try to get involved in things. But somebody comes along with something like the bath salts, and you think somebody's got to do something about it, and I guess it's me.
It's your job.
Yeah,
and it's also your job to wrap up the show.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. So I like doing this with you, Jody, because the time flies by.
It does. We have fun.
So I will say we will be back shortly with another update. And if you want to get on my mailing list, my website, they can sign up.
SenatorMarkley.com.
SenatorMarkley.com. I don't visit the website myself, but you're welcome to go there, and you can get emails from me with short video updates. But thank you for your time. This is State Senator Joe Markley, and we will be back again to you in a couple of weeks.